right, welcome to the Dales Report, and happy to be joined with the chairman and CEO of Psybio Therapeutics. Evan Levine joins us again. And Evan, how are things?
Excellent, Chad. Thanks for hosting me again.
Appreciate being here. I appreciate it. I know it's a busy time for you, and the industry seems to be developing more and more, garnering some interest, I think, from an investment perspective. But I wanted to have you on, get an update, have somewhat of a recap from our last conversation, because last time we connected, you talked about what's important for your company, which is all about developing intellectual property-based technology. You have a patent pending bacterial synthesis development methodology to develop psilocybin that you feel you can do cheaper, faster, greener versus any other company in the space. So my first question, let's get a recap. Why do you feel that way?
Sure. Well, the genesis of Psybio is based on our collaboration with Miami University.
Okay.
And that research first got published at the end of 2019 by a young faculty member accomplishing a research first, being able to use genetically modified bacteria to convert that into psilocybin in a very efficient manner, which means cheaper, faster, greener. However, psilocybin was really just the first inning of this platform technology. We're developing a whole portfolio of tryptamines from different plants and fungi that we believe could have potential therapeutic benefit for a whole host of different health conditions.
Do you feel like, let's talk a little bit about the momentum that you're starting to build as the industry starts to advance. What's the kind of intention that you're starting to garner from, let's say, institutions or even like accredited investors?
Certainly. So we started off in an industry where there were very few companies, and now I think there are approximately 40 public companies that are using the word psychedelic in the business plan. Well, I think that this is going to very much evolve over the next year.
Yeah.
So we're all getting lumped together under this category of psychedelics, but a lot of companies are doing a lot of different things. There's companies that are service-based. There's companies that are data-driven. And then there's companies like ours, which are pure play, intellectual property-driven biotechnology companies that are developing compounds for intended therapeutic benefits for, again, a variety of different human health conditions.
So, like, as we talk about this more and more, and I want to go back to the whole investment side, because you'd mentioned to me off camera, there is a group, Maxim Group out of New York, which is an investment firm, mentioned you as a company to watch, which is very positive. So saying that, wanted to ask, do you think investors should expect more coverage in the near term that potentially could include rating and price target in the coming quarters?
Well, Maxim Group did put a rating and price target on us. So they did put a buy on us.
Okay.
That coverage was launched yesterday. We're in a portfolio of other companies that are focusing on psychedelic space. They put a price target on it initially of $1.50 Canadian. So we've gotten our first coverage, and we're a brand new company. We've only been public for 4 months now, so to already be covered by a venerated institutional analyst dedicated to the biotechnology sector was a huge accomplishment for us. And yes, we're very hopeful that more will follow. We're
great.
out there. We are speaking to analysts. We're speaking to institutional investors. As a matter of fact, our going public deal was backed by institutional investors out of New York City that are dedicated to healthcare investing.
So that's great. Walk me into that conversation then. What is the conversations that are happening and what they're hearing and liking with what you're providing?
Well, what we're doing at Psybio is very, very different than any of the other biotechnology companies that are in the space. Just as far as magic mushroom as an example, we're looking holistically at the entire magic mushroom, and we're developing different compounds that exist within that magic mushroom beyond psilocybin that we believe have the ability to offer this therapeutic benefit that's being experienced throughout the globe, with data being collected on the positive efficacy from psilocybin and some other psychedelic drugs. Well, there are far more compounds within these plants and fungus that than the prominent psychotropic molecules that have become household words. For instance, within the magic mushroom, there are hundreds and hundreds of enzymes and metabolites, but we've identified 3 others that are very important along the enzymatic pathway that converts tryptophan into psilocybin and psilocin. And we're developing aeruginascin, baeocystin, and norbaeocystinn in concert and alone, looking at these and studying them for behavioral changes in our models, and looking to develop a whole portfolio around this technology.
So where did this whole idea come from? Because a lot of it is the typical, like, you think of a mushroom, you're thinking of psilocybin, but you're saying there's more. Where did that idea even come to fruition?
Well, back in 2018, Dirk Hoffmeister and his group at Leibniz Institute published a paper on the enzymatic pathway, how tryptophan converts itself within a magic mushroom into
Okay.
psilocybin. And it started a whole flurry of research. And there are several groups out there that determined that they could grow psilocybin from a yeast substrate. So there are patents that have been filed on yeast, and several groups went out there to try to achieve that goal. Dr. Andrew Jones at Miami University, he set out and he was the first and only at this point to do this in bacteria. So our intellectual property is based on using a bacterial host to convert into psilocybin and these other side products as well.
So what's the market potential? Are you garnering a lot of interest? Like, is there a collaboration agreements potentially on the horizon with other companies within the space? Like, paint the picture, fast forward for me as to where this looks, let's say in 6 months to a year.
Sure. Well, our initial collaboration is around Miami University, which is the foundation of our company. We've also gone and contracted with Albany Molecular Research in upstate New York to do our fermentation scale up of psilocybin. We've contracted with Berkeley National Lab to do our scale up of norbaeocystinn, and we just brought on Bios Industry in Europe to do our scale ups as well for European clinical trials. So those collaborations have already been set,
Right.
and of course, there'll be addition because the entire point of putting these into commercial facilities is to get clinical batch material, present
Right.
this to the FDA, and initiate clinical trials in 2022.
So you're thinking timeline wise is still on par with early 2022?
The goal internally is to file an IND this year.
Okay, good to know. Let's get an update on day-to-day operations. You'd mentioned obviously some of the work that's being done and conducted overseas into Europe. You recently initiated your first European pilot scale batch manufacturing of proprietary biosynthetic formulation of psilocybin, which we've been talking about. So great work. This is in collaboration with Bios Industries that you just said. So based off of this, part of what you'll be working on is the development and testing of something called combination therapies. So explain to us what that means and why that's important.
So we're actually studying combinatorial drug development across our different portfolios in different plants and different fungi as well. However, when referring to the magic mushroom, combinatorial psilocybin includes developing psilocybin, which is the most known psychotropic compound within a magic mushroom, with some of these other side products. Aeruginascin, baeocystin, norbaeocystinn, and there is scant literature out there on these other metabolites. Nobody really knows what they do. We are one of the first groups out there to actually synthesize and study these. So we believe that the portfolio does have an innate synergy. So we're developing these and on a daily basis because we have our own dedicated vivarium at Miami University. On a daily basis, we are dosing animals in different behavioral models, head twitch response, locomotion, sucrose preference testing, social avoidance, elevated maze, rat casino. We're studying the behaviors of these rats when dosed with different combinations
And what are you
of
seeing?
well, we've so far we put out one publishing, which still hasn't been fully announced yet, with the evidence that if you could drastically reduce the amount of psilocybin and dramatically increase the amount of norbaeocystinn, we get a more profound head twitch response.
Right,
And this again is a research first because nobody's really studied norbaeocystinn. Nobody
right.
really knows what it does. So these
No.
other metabolites, we're the only company that we're aware of that are studying these type of molecules within these different plants.
Yeah, it's I don't want to focus on other companies, but why don't you think other companies or more companies are focused on this?
Uh, the industry is brand new.
Yeah.
When in 2019, when we were looking for transactions, we didn't see anything that we felt was investable from a proprietary or scientific
Yeah.
standpoint. There was just nothing around. And by the time we acquired the rights from Miami University, there were a couple of companies that went out there and went public. But these companies were really based on acquiring ketamine clinics with the future vision that you'd be administering psychedelic compounds
Right.
within the clinical setting. So that's what was out there. Um, science doesn't take, minutes and, days. Science
No.
takes, months, years to actually develop. So where all of a sudden did all these companies come from? My personal opinion is that a lot of groups that had expertise in cannabis and saw what a success it was in the capital
Jumping in.
markets set out to, create a business plan using, some type of psychedelic foundation
Got it.
along. But a lot of these companies that we follow, we don't see any, foundational intellectual property
Yeah.
that sets a lot of these aside.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you've had actually a lot of great news lately, whether it's broadening partnerships with major universities to advance drug development programs to patenting new intellectual property on an average of once per month for your psychedelic platform, which, by the way, is incredible. So are you finding as the industry continues to grow, more and more investors are starting to understand the methodology that you're developing?
I don't even think it's begun yet. I think that
Right?
we are very fortunate, appreciated to have our first write up yesterday, but the investment banks are just starting to get into this business. Just about a week ago, I presented HC Wainwright.
How was that?
It was excellent. I believe there are 35 companies on the slate. I finally got an opportunity due to the video and the times we're in to actually watch some of the other companies and see what the competitors in the industry are doing. So for me, it was invaluable from that perspective as
It's
well.
great.
But we got a lot of attendance. We got a lot of feedback afterwards.
What was
And
some of the
you,
feedback that you got based off of your presentation?
the feedback has generally been positive. We are working in an area that nobody's yet explored. So we're basically we're creating the path
It's
for
great.
this type of research.
Well, we've talked about this off and on, like, for the last couple of interviews, and I know you're very informative when it comes to this industry. I bring this up because I say all this because there seems to be a lot of companies in the space putting out nice press releases about various psychedelic compounds that they're working with. But quite honestly, when you do look a little bit closer, many own little of the underlying IP patents or delivery systems. How is this different for your company, and especially with your psilocybin bacteria synthesis process?
Well, we have not focused, on altering administration or devices or any, new and interesting ways to deliver this. Psilocybin itself is highly effective, and it's extremely potent. The way it's delivered right now, we feel is quite satisfactory. I mean,
Hmm.
yes, you could push the experience up 5 or 10 minutes. A different delivery method, you're going to probably change the pharmacokinetics. I mean, there are certainly different ways to administer these type of compounds. However, our focus is on creating new and exciting API that, in conjunction with each other, makes improved therapeutics, no matter how they're delivered, whether it's injectable or oral,
And owning it as well, right?
and owning it as well.
Last thing I wanted to ask, you'd mentioned to me off camera earlier this week that out of your entire career, you've been more this opportunity. You've never been more excited about the opportunity the industry presents based off of the early research that's being conducted. Do you care to elaborate off of that, and how, with your experience, you plan to have Psybio at the forefront of it all?
Well, we're doing that as we speak, and why I talk about this is one of the most exciting things I've ever done. I mean, obviously, look at what this industry is doing. It's incredibly different and exciting. I've been working in different areas of life sciences my entire career. And when it comes down to individual companies and risks, biotechnology is a very complex, probabilistic game.
Okay.
And unfortunately, most compounds do not make it through the clinic. They do
Right.
not make it from the bench, even into the clinic. They did not make it past the first few phases because as you get larger and larger, the outcome changes as you add, a higher statistical group to it. I believe, that these psychedelics are going to be approved for human consumption for therapeutic benefit. I have highly confident in this. If anything goes wrong along the pathway of these larger companies such as Compass or Usona, if they somehow get an unfortunate result, it's going to bear down on the entire industry. But
Right.
so far, what we've seen, not just in the last, few decades, but thousands of years, these
Yeah.
compounds have showed, promise to be efficacious towards these maladies that we've discussed. And I do not lose any sleep wondering whether psilocybin or some of these other compounds that we're developing have a very high likelihood of being approved. How do we know? Again, we're relying on companies such as Compass and Usona that are already in statistical studies right now to determine the outcome, but they're leading the charge, and it's going to open up a tremendous amount of more research and discovery as we show that these do have a likelihood of getting approved. And that's why we're all here. That's why we're putting them into clinical trials, with the hope that we have the statistics in our favor, and that, we're going to change the course of some of these challenges.
When you look at the history of this plant, and especially when you bring in indigenous people, it's a very delicate, obviously, conversation to obviously merge two audiences into one. You have the business side, the capital market side, and obviously the people that are very protective of the plant and the history that it represents. Are there certain programs, communities, as you start to develop as a company, that you'll look to that gives back to communities? Because let's face it, this isn't just about making money. This is about people's quality of life. And there's a lot of people, as we know, over the past year that have ended their life through suicide, which is very tragic. But are those some of the conversations that you have amongst your company as you start to plan out the strategy of your overall model later on down the road?
Well, being in the business, we have, quite a few anecdotes that we've all, discovered that these type of compounds have truly helped people, whether it's advanced depression or it's as far as suicidal. And these drugs, have helped a lot of people. So the industry itself has created, a incredible amount of outreach. There are support groups out there. We get letters all the time. I got a letter from somebody, after my last webinar, that this person believes that psilocybin and ayahuasca has reversed their autism. So a lot of these anecdotes just get you more and more excited to want to be part of something that's, quite much larger than Psybio Therapeutics. Why we're at the forefront? I think that what's going to matter in the next couple of quarters is who and what groups are doing, commencing legitimate manufacturing in GMP facilities that are going to do rigorous statistical studies of their target molecules. Do they even own the target molecules or the devices that they're testing in the clinic? I think over the next couple of quarters, a lot of the noise will get separated into companies that are truly going after a goal of getting new and exciting compounds approved.
When you're doing like new patent IPs on a monthly basis, where does that sit in the grand scheme of things? Like, is that enough? Is that very consistent? Like, if I'm an investor and I'm trying to find out what makes sense, because as you just said, many of these compounds won't make it through, so diversification is going to be more important than ever. But can you maybe educate me on what that all means and how much stuff does need to develop for success later on down the road?
Sure. More specifically, what I meant is that most biotechnology drug candidates don't make it to the finish line and get approved. A very small percentage of them actually make it to pivotal studies. So I'm highly confident on many of the drugs that are being developed under the psychedelic umbrella that they have a real possibility of getting approved, because there's just enough data floating around and the community is requesting for it. That's why there's small pockets of decriminalization going on. The people want this product. They wanted alcohol, that couldn't be suppressed. They wanted cannabis, that couldn't be suppressed. And it's extraordinarily desired right now, and that's why you're seeing a lot of news coming in out on the legalization front. We think the only real pathway to legalization is an FDA-approved molecule.
Of course.
So, like following the.
Do you feel confidently that will happen?
I feel that the probability of us working on what we're working on is going to, reach a successful outcome. There's no guarantee. I mean, we have to do robust statistical studies, blinded comparisons to demonstrate that the drugs, our study drugs are working on, either are superior to standard of care or whatever control is used. This is a must do for a biotechnology company that is looking to eventually be in the sales of prescription drugs in this category.
Good to know. Always fascinating. Learn a lot from you, that's for sure. But I know you're busy. Let's keep in touch and keep the great work going.
I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Evan.
Take care.